Welcome back. It's another edition of A Few Extra Bucs, your podcast on pewterpowers.com. We'd like to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews and Lutz on the corner of Northdale Mabry and Van Dyke, and of course our friends at Sea Dog Brewing Company. Great locations on the beach in Treasure Island and of course in Clearwater. I'm Mike Nabors. The Bucs are off this Tuesday, but we are not off. We want to give you Bucs fans some perspective and look ahead and kind of look back and kind of get a feel for this football team as best as we can after hearing from Dirk Cutter on Monday. And we're going to have a lot of things coming up on pewterpowers.com. We'll have our video wrap tomorrow after we talk to the players gearing up for the world champion Philadelphia Eagles coming to Raymond James Stadium for the home opener this Sunday. All right, let's bring in our voice of reason, our producer, Justin Thomas. I know you brought in a lot of good sound from Dirk Cutter, right?
I did. A lot of great stuff.
Yeah, where Dirk Cutter finally admits who calls the plays. We'll get to that in a second. And then we'll have Roy Cummings, our Buccaneer insider. Right off the bat, Roy, I want to talk about this. Dirk Cutter, he's not perfect. He's been up and down as head coach, but he is consistent when it comes to season openers. He's won all three since he's been the head coach of the Buccaneers. Now, the first year, things turned out pretty good. They won 9 games. Of course, last year was abysmal. Jameis Winston's injury. And then you have this year. We'll see if they can parlay the great road win against the New Orleans Saints into a great season. But what do you make of Cutter being 3-0 in season openers? Is there something to be said for that? Is that just coincidence? I know every season's different. What do you think of that?
I really think it's just a coincidence. I don't think it's a situation where he coaches better in game one, or the team's better prepared in game one, or that they have a lesser opponent. And I think it's really just a coincidence. One of those quirks of the schedule, quirks of nature, whatever you want to call it. But I'll tell you what, it's a good thing. Yes, it didn't work out last year because a lot of things out of their control, happened beyond that. Some things in their control, but the injuries started to pile up. But here, you can't beat a good start. And I was kind of thinking back on this game anyway, and thinking, gosh, the defense really struggled right out of the gate. Go down 7-0. It seems like the Bucs are always playing from behind, but one thing they're not playing from behind right now on is the schedule, and that's good when you got the two teams coming in that they got coming in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, Dirk Cutter had an impressive win against the Saints last Sunday, but that first game he ever coached in Atlanta, that was an impressive win too, going on the road and winning that game against the Falcons. Okay, let's talk about one of the top stories with the Bucs. We were wondering last time we all talked, why is Dirk Cutter not admitting who's calling plays? Well, how about this? He finally did, giving some credit to his offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, in Monday's presser. Here goes.
Monk did a great job calling the plays yesterday, but the Buccaneers did a great job of executing the plays yesterday. And that was a great example of execution. Monk did a terrific job. We had good rhythm. We've had good rhythm all through the preseason. But that was a game of execution.
We should have Justin play the Hallelujah chorus. Dirk, was it hard? There you go. That's all you had to say. We'll leave you alone now. We won't ask you about it anymore. Why the turnaround? Why the 180, you think?
I don't know. I think he finally just, decided, like maybe a lot of people were saying, like we were saying, it's like you're being silly here. What's the big deal, really? And I look, you're talking to a guy who doesn't think it matters that much who calls the plays. And by the way, boy, Dirk Cutter sure sounded an awful lot like some guy I know named Roy Cummings, who said exactly what he said Sunday after the game, and has said it repeatedly on numerous radio interviews that I've done since. But, he's right. At the end of the day, and as we talked about it, Mike and Justin, you guys know, I broke down what that play sheet is like and what is on there. And at the end of the day, there's not that many options. Pretty much what you're going to call in most situations anyway. You know what your best play is. You know what you run well. You know what the quarterback likes. And you take it from there. And really then it's a matter of executing the plays. And I agree with Dirk Cutter 100%. It was a matter of executing the plays that were called. That was the difference in the game offensively.
Well, my whole point is you're right. I don't think it's a big deal, but he made it a big deal. So it became a bigger deal than it should have been. I thought this was one of the most interesting things out of his press conference after the Saints game when they got back in town to Tampa at One Buc Place. He was criticized last year for having a soft training camp. Hard Knocks was there. Maybe that team wasn't ready. You could point at so many things when a team, only wins 5 games. But he admitted in this press conference that practices have been better this offseason, this training camp, and this season so far.
I think these guys have done a good job of practicing harder, longer. I mean, we practiced hard enough in the past, but I think just harder, longer, especially during training camp, those can get monotonous for the players at times, especially for the guys that aren't new. I mean, for rookies, for young guys or new guys to your team, training camp practice, there's always learning. But for guys like Mike and Hump and Cam Brate, some guys like that who have been here going in their fourth year, they've heard those installs many times.
Harder, longer. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I'll say this: the thing that's different for me is, and Mike, you were there last year. You and I were there every practice. We heard it repeatedly from Dirk Cutter last year, how he would come off the field dozens of times during training camp, preseason, clearly unhappy with the tempo of practice.
Yeah.
It became a bit of an issue. I remember late in training camp when they started running gassers for the first time, and I pointed it out to him, and he said, "Well, what's the big deal about football players running gassers?" I said, "You've never seen that before?" I said, "No, I've never seen it in this camp before." But this year they did it after every practice, and we seldom, if ever, heard Dirk Cutter talk about a bad tempo in practice. They didn't always have great practices, but we seldom, if ever, heard him complaining about the tempo, the effort in practice, that kind of thing. I think he got a lot more out of these guys during the workouts than he got last year. And I think in a lot of ways, I think that kind of set this team up for the success they had in opening week.
We've talked about Monken calling the plays, and now we're touching on practice. It seems like, always when a team struggles and you have lame duck, a head coach and potentially a general manager here in Jason Light, you want to fine-tune things. And we're seeing that with this football team. We're seeing that with the play calling. We're seeing that with practice. We're seeing it with subtle things. I think it was a harder training camp than it was a year ago. Can you point to some of that? Because obviously you have meetings when a season's over after a bad season like they had last year. And we're seeing, obviously some things that probably came out of those meetings.
Yeah, I think we are. And, I think some of it, probably has to do with the fact that you've got a potentially lame duck or coach that's on the hot seat and a GM. But Jason Light got his contract extended. Let's not forget that. I think the Bucs learned from last year. I think they went into last year believing all the press clippings, as we used to call them when there were press clippings. Everything that was being said about them. That they were the darling team of the NFL, that they were ready to break out, that they were on the verge of a big playoff run, potentially a very deep playoff run. I think they all believed that, and I think they lost their edge. And I think they learned just how much that edge, how important that edge is. And I think there's a little bit of animosity, some angst built up with this team this year because it's completely different. They're not the darling of the NFL anymore. They're one of the most disrespected teams in the NFL. They're picked to win one game by the Sporting News. They're number 31, if not 32, on everybody's strength power rankings. That kind of thing. Nobody gave them a chance against New Orleans, obviously. I think they've taken that to heart and said, look, we're better than that. Let's go prove that we're better than that. And they did on opening week.
Well, two guys who really looked great, obviously, in that first game were wide receivers Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson. 12 catches they combined for 293 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. Two guys who were almost perfect in that game against the New Orleans Saints. Dirk Cutter talked about having his top 2 guys, and I know Chris Godwin's considered an up-and-comer, but having his top 2 guys be perfect in that first game.
To hit them all 12 of those times is pretty unusual. And I thought Deshaun and Mike both have really practiced hard leading up to this point and worked on things that we knew were going to come up in this game. And I thought that really helped. Then Fitz made good decisions as well.
Yeah, 12 targets is what he's alluding to, and that would be 12 catches. And, We saw some of that from Mike Evans last year, but not the consistency he wanted in terms of yards after the catch. That's something he even said in the offseason he wanted to improve on. He's already done that in the first game. And Deshaun Jackson, and we've talked about that in the last couple of podcasts, how he just looks like a rededicated guy. And it goes back to the narrative you just talked about, maybe some angst there, that he's heard a lot of things, and he's a prideful player. He's been in this league a long time, and he's a guy that wants the football. And when you give him the football, he's going to be a happier guy. And you'd probably say that about him more than any receiver on this football team in terms of demanding the football. But having those two guys do what they do, Roy, how dangerous is this offense going to be moving forward? And we'll talk about Philadelphia in our next podcast coming up more on Thursday. But having Mike Evans and having Deshaun Jackson, 12 targets, 12 catches, and then you have guys like Godwin, Howard, Cam Brate, and then the running game. I mean, it's just crazy to me how good this offense can be. And we saw it against New Orleans.
Yeah, the Buccaneers set a record on Sunday for most points by their offense in a game, or tied a record, I should say. And you know what? We shouldn't be surprised. This is the best offense the Buccaneers have ever had. It's the deepest offense, the most talented offense. We should not be surprised by record-setting performances. We should be expecting them out of this unit, no matter who's a quarterback, really. It might be different if Ryan Griffin were in there, but whether it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, in my opinion, a savvy veteran, proved it the other day, or Jameis Winston, an up-and-coming kid who I think figured some things out late last year, this is a record-setting offense. It should be. The talent is there. You get the play calls right, you execute the plays right. You should be able to put up 28, 30 points on a daily basis, on a Sunday basis. These guys, they're one of the best offenses in the league, and I think by the end of the season, people are going to recognize it as that.
I thought it was an interesting stat. They scored 48 points against the New Orleans Saints. The last time they scored 48 points was when they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. That's right. That was kind of a big game.
It kind of was. So maybe that's a good omen for the Bucs. All right, let's talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't know how much more we can talk about him. I mean, the fact that this guy did what he did, his best game as a pro, 417 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, just unbelievable effort. Dirk Cutter was asked about, the kind of guy he is. And he at first said, it's kind of hard for me to answer that question, but then he went into more detail.
He's a down-to-earth guy. He's got a great sense of humor. He's witty. He's intelligent. He's well-spoken. He backs up what he says with how he plays. The players respect him. He doesn't try to come on too strong, but at the same time, he's a good leader. When we talked, I think, early in the year about the difference between Jameis's leadership style and Fitz's leadership style, there's different ways to do it, and there's 2 good examples of it, both good leaders, and we've had other good leaders step up so far.
Threw a little Jameis in there. That was nice of Dirk Cutter. Yeah, you talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick. The one thing to me, we can throw out all the numbers we want about that opening win, but no interceptions. And you know what? I know it's the preseason, but we haven't seen any interceptions out of these quarterbacks in the preseason or so far in the regular season. And if they continue to do that, something that actually has plagued Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston, you do that along with using all these weapons, it'll be fun to watch this offense.
Yeah, it will. You might have just jinxed him on that interception thing.
I knocked on wood here. Hear that?
But, you would have expected 1 or 2 by now. I'm a little surprised they don't have one. But, look, that goes back to the fact that on Sunday in particular, there's no question, as I said before, Ryan Fitzpatrick was exquisite in terms of decision-making. Every time he threw the ball, he made the right throw. Every time he decided to tuck it and run, he made the right throw. He went up to the line of scrimmage, and I don't think he, missed one call, one audible. It seemed like he was just right on the mark with everything he was doing the whole way through, and the Bucs benefited from it. So as long as you continue to make the right decisions with the ball in your hands in terms of throwing it, you throw it away when the play's not there, and you take advantage of the play that is there, you're going to be successful, and you're going to probably be turnover-free. Every once in a while, something's going to get tipped. You're going to make a mistake, but this is the part where Jameis Winston probably has to learn. Such a good learning tool, this particular game on tape for Jameis Winston. Go back and watch how Ryan Fitzpatrick basically took what the defense gave him, even when it was deep. He found the one-on-one coverage, threw the ball down the field, gave his receiver a chance to catch it as long as he beat the defender, and most of the time they beat the defender. So the lesson to be learned there for Jameis Winston: give your team a chance, give the players a chance, let them make plays, get the ball in their hands, and be content taking what the defense gives you, because sometimes the defense is going to give you that long ball too. So that's the thing that I think, is one of the reasons they haven't given up a pick yet, because both quarterbacks in preseason were playing smart like that, and obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick carried it over into the regular season on Sunday.
We'll see how much power I have with the interceptions moving forward. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, also the second leading rusher for the Bucs. He had a rushing touchdown and 36 rushing yards, and each one of those yards were huge, especially that last run for a first down for this football team. You had Peyton Barber. I thought Peyton Barber very promising in that game against the New Orleans Saints. 69 yards, averaged 3.63 per touch. We didn't really touch on this last time because there was so much to get into with the Bucs win over the Saints. But the offensive line was very impressive in so many ways for the Bucs, and I cover the Saints along with the Bucs. I remember talking to Shelton Rankins after the game, the defensive tackle for the Saints, and I asked him the difference in the offensive line this year, because obviously he's faced the Bucs for a few years, and first guy he said right away, Ryan Jensen. He said Ryan Jensen has changed that offensive line, and we saw it in that game.
Yeah, look, Ryan Jensen brings another level of not just experience to the Bucs line that was needed, but top level experience. This is a Pro Bowl caliber player, one of the meanest players in the NFL. That's always a good thing for an offensive line. And what it does is it allows Ali Marpet to go back to guard, which is his best spot. Now he's next to Donovan Smith, and in my opinion, I think the combination of Donovan Smith at left tackle and Ali Marpet at left guard, in particular, along with Jensen obviously at center, is going to, I think it's going to make for a real strength for this running game going forward. Those three guys, I think, are going to allow this team to run the ball left at a pretty good clip. I think at the end of the day, or maybe even before the season, well before the season's out, you might start to see some splits where the Bucs are averaging maybe 5.66 yards a carry off on the left side, and maybe only and a little bit less than that, maybe half as much over on the right side, because that left side is strong right now, and Ryan Jensen's part of that.
Is this a redshirt season for Ronald Jones?
Not yet, but it can't be, because I think it's the last season for Jacquizz Rodgers. I think Quiz has lost his fastball. I think he's lost his burst. He's still a serviceable guy. But he was never anything more than a serviceable guy. If you take a serviceable guy like Jacquizz Rodgers and try to put him into a role that's too big for him, you're not going to be happy with the results. Losing Charles Sims hurts. It can't be a redshirt season for him. I'm still surprised. And look, I said it on our podcast a couple of times near the end of the preseason. I thought the Bucs would go out and get a running back. I'm a little surprised they didn't pick up Mike Gillislee. Just to add some depth there. I guess they're happy with the core they've got, including Ronald Jones. But right now, in my opinion, it cannot be a redshirt season for Ronald Jones. He's got to figure it out, and he's going to have to figure it out fast. I have a lot of belief and faith in Peyton Barber. I think he can be solid. But right now, I'm not sure Peyton Barber is a guy that the Bucs really want to give the ball to any more than maybe 18 times a game, tops. So I think they've got to find somebody else to play as a complement to him, and if they don't find it, they're going to have some trouble moving the ball on the ground.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we're going to dive into the Eagles preview coming up on Thursday in our podcast. This is kind of a state of the Bucs. I know you Bucs fans are always hungry for sound and analysis, and the Bucs are off today, so we'd like to give you something on a Tuesday. Let's talk about the defense quickly before we get to our 3 and out segment, Roy. The rookie cornerbacks, Carlton Davis, MJ Stewart got thrown in there against Drew Brees, and Dirk Cutter said, you know what, as expected, the result is what it is.
Well, if you're a rookie cornerback and your first NFL game is in the Superdome against a Hall of Fame quarterback, I would say that they did about how most rookie cornerbacks would do in that same situation. So I thought they both got better as the game went on, and I think they both learned some lessons that will carry with them as we move forward.
And I think those guys have a lot of promise, but it would be nice to have Brent Grimes back, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I'll echo a little bit of what Dirk Cutter just said, and I said this many times before, leading up to the game. I don't understand why NFL fans if you've been around the game for any more than a couple of years, you have to be smarter than to think that some rookie cornerback is going to go out there and play at a high caliber. It's high, at a high level. It's just not going to happen. It is next to quarterback and left tackle, and maybe just next to quarterback. It is the toughest position to play in this game. And when you're facing quarterbacks like Drew Brees and next week even Nick Foles, and beyond that, Ben Roethlisberger, it is going to be tough. Every game for your first year plus is going to be a learning lesson, and you are going to learn something different, and they are going to pick on you. They were picking on Carlton Davis early on because he was allowing himself to get picked on, and they're going to find the weakness in that guy. I don't care how talented he is. It's about talent, but it's also about understanding how to mirror a receiver, understanding his tendencies and his routes, things like that, the adjustments you have to make, just very, very difficult. And I agree with Dirk. The best news is they didn't cost the Bucs a game, okay? And, go back and again, look at how Vernon Hargreaves, who was the 11th overall pick in the draft, and most people in that draft class thought he was by far the best cornerback in the draft and probably worthy of a pick higher than 11th overall. That was the best cornerback in that draft. And it was a pretty good cornerback draft. We're talking this year about guys like MJ Stewart, Carlton Davis, Jordan White. We're talking about defensive backs selected in the 3rd, 4th round, 5th round. What makes anyone think that these guys are going to go out there and establish the Buccaneers as some special secondary? It's not going to happen. They're going to get picked on. They're going to get beat. And you better just hope that the safeties behind them or the linebackers are covering their butts, because if they're not, they are going to cost this team a game. And guess what? That is going to happen. That's one of the problems this team has. They are very thin at cornerback. Vernon Hargreaves is hurt. Brent Grimes is hurt. They are going to need those young corners to step up in a big way, but as good as they step up, they're still going to slip. And when they slip, it's going to cost this team in a big way. So they did a good job, recovering from some mistakes early on, got better as the game went on, as Dirk said. But boy, oh boy, you just don't want to hope that you're throwing rookies out there in the secondary in the NFL against quarterbacks the likes of which the Bucs are going to face all season, because you're going to lose that game more, or in that situation more often than you win.
You mentioned Vernon Hargreaves. Dirk Cutter had a lot of great things to say about him in Monday's press conference. Very happy with the way he's rebounded in the offseason. And in the first game, he forced that big fumble that Justin Evans scooped up and scored a touchdown with, a pivotal play in the game against the Saints. All right, well, we're nearing the finish line here. It's time for 3 and Out. And you know what time that is, Justin? Dean Rayburn, baby. Vintage 70s, 80s game show stuff there. We love it. All right, this is 3 and Out. 3 questions for Roy Cummings, and he's out of here. He has not seen these questions. You know what I love about the football season, the NFL? You have overreaction in the preseason, and then you have week 1 overreaction. I'm looking at 2 rookie quarterbacks here. One is the first overall pick, Baker Mayfield. Another one is Sam Darnold, who was the second quarterback picked in this NFL draft. Baker Mayfield didn't play. Darnold lit it up for the Jets. If you were starting a franchise right now, who would you take, Roy Cummings?
Oh, it's not even close. Sam Darnold.
Wow.
In my opinion, he was the best, most prepared quarterback in the draft last year coming out of college. I understand what Baker Mayfield can do. I think he was more effective in college than he ever will be in the NFL. He's got a skill set that will work in this league, but you've got to cater your offense to it. Sam Darnold has the size. He's a drop-back passer. He's a smart kid. He understands pro concepts. He's going to be around the league for a good 10, 12, 15 years, maybe more, and he will be one of those guys who consistently, in my opinion, in time, will have his team in the playoff hunt.
So Cleveland screwed up again?
Oh, yeah, of course. I expect nothing else from Cleveland.
I love Baker Mayfield, but you may be right on that one. I know it's early, but that's why we do podcasts, and that's why we can have fun. All right, here's our second question in our 3 and Out. All right, I know it's early again, but we can have fun with this. In the NFC South, we've had one game so far this NFL season But who are you most scared of if you're the Bucs? Saints, Falcons, or Panthers?
Wow, that's a tough one. I'm still going to say the Falcons. I still think they're the best team in the division from top to bottom. I still think they're riding a little bit of a high from the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and I think they're just mad that they didn't get back there last year. I think they've got, in my opinion, probably the best quarterback in the division. I'll give Matt Ryan the edge over Drew Brees just because he's a little bit younger. I think Brees is, maybe the arm strength's not quite what it used to be. I mean, he's smart enough to make every play, but I just think that overall depth of the roster, premier players, I think the Falcons are the better team.
Yeah, that's a tough question too. I still think the Saints are a playoff team. I still see all three of these teams potentially going to the playoffs. I still see in the Bucs, it's kind of that team on the outside looking in. There's something about this Panthers team, though. I think Cam Newton has more weapons. I like that Norv Turner may help him a little bit. I think that Panthers team, I'm not going to say that I'm the most scared of them, but I think they're the most interesting team because I think they can do a lot because they have things that they haven't had in the past. So we'll see on that. Okay. Last question, we'll get you out of here. In this Tampa Bay market, right now, the Lightning have reigned supreme for years. But today it was announced their general manager, Steve Yzerman, is stepping down, will be an advisor for one more year. I don't really know the dynamics of what's going on over there. But my question to you is, in 2 years from now, who's going to be more successful, Roy? The Lightning, the Rays, the Red Hot Rays, or the Bucs?
Wow. Man.
How about that one, huh?
I'll say this. I'm going to pick the Lightning, and here's why. Steve Yzerman has set this team up for a long run of success. He did a tremendous job the last 2 years of retaining their best players. They're in a salary cap situation that they can manage. They've got a lot of depth at a lot of places. I think Steve Yzerman has set this team up to be one of the most dynamic teams in the NHL for at least another 5 years. I'm going to pick the Lightning. I believe in them, man. They've done it already, and I don't see them getting any worse.
I would pick the Lightning too. I'd love to pick the Rays. I'm a baseball guy like you, but the problem is they're in the division with the dang Red Sox and Yankees, and that makes it really tough on them. No matter how much they maneuver the roster, no matter how much they do this innovative pitching routine where they have 80 pitchers every game, it's been a fun season for the Rays, but that's a roadblock. But, yeah, once you put that in place, you see that really in any league. If you put that formula in place, it lasts for a while. Yeah,
and as you said with the Rays, I'll say about the Bucs. They're in the toughest division in the NFL. Yeah. They've got the Saints, and they've got the Falcons, and they've got the Panthers who, you could toss a coin and say, okay, this is your division champion this year. All of them are capable of getting to the playoffs, in my opinion, and I'll be surprised if at least two of them don't. So I think the NFC South is, in essence, the AL East of the NFL.
Poor Bucs. They just can't catch a break.
Yeah.
Well, Justin Thomas is not in Tampa Bay. He's in Salt Lake City, Utah. Justin, before we go, did Roy and I leave anything out?
You didn't leave anything out, but Roy, I'm curious what Matt Ryan has on you for you to pick him to be the better QB than Drew Brees.
Well, I'm not saying he's the better QB talent or historically.
No, but right now you're saying he's the better one.
No, yeah, he is. He's the better quarterback right now. Wow. He's the better quarterback.
I don't see.
He'll finish.
After that first game, I don't see any drop off in Drew Brees. I mean, he was.
I don't see any drop off in Matt Ryan.
Well,
what about the red zone?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Saints were able to score.
That's not his fault. That's not his fault. That's there's other players involved in that. He is in just my opinion. He's the best quarterback right now in this division. Drew Brees is a talent that is fading in a way, not significantly. Drew Brees is not playing his best football of his career right now. Matt Ryan is.
Interesting. Well, you know what, Justin? That was we're kind of ganging up on Roy there.
And by the way, Drew Brees is going to the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about that. I don't think Matt Ryan's going to the Hall of Fame. But right now, Matt Ryan's the best quarterback in this division.
All right. Well, that wraps up 3 and Out. That wraps up A Few Extra Bucs. I'd like to thank Justin Thomas. I'd like to thank Roy Cummings. I'd like to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews in Lutz, Florida, on the corner of North Del Mabry and Van Dyke. Great place. And Sea Dog Brewing Company, 2 great locations in Clearwater and Treasure Island on the beach. Great brews, great food, great service. Please subscribe to pewterpirates.com. It is free, folks, and our podcast is blowing up. We started off with Roy's wife and a couple of my family members and Justin's friends, and now we're having hundreds and hundreds of people pile on. So we appreciate you listening. We're really gaining a lot of traction each week. We're on iTunes now. So subscribe to pewterpirates.com. Check out our videos and all our segments. We have a rookie diary with MJ Stewart, and we have all kinds of special things coming up. So it's free. Enjoy it. Thanks for listening to A Few Extra Bucs podcast. We'll talk to you again on Thursday, previewing the home opener against those world champion Eagles.